My guest today is Liz Bell Young, author of the new book, Let There Be Havens. This book, and I imagine this conversation is going to be a little bit different than what you're used to hearing on this show. And that's because it's hard to put Liz in a box that neatly defines what she does and how it relates to interior design, which is exactly why I'm so excited to be talking with her. I would describe Liz, and I only know her based on her book, as an essayist, a poet, a creative thinker, and underneath it all, as someone whose life work is about creating experiences that foster deeply felt human connection. And she does this from the perspective of creating all kinds of havens for people, which brings us around to the concept of home. Now, I don't always list a bunch of professional credentials when I introduce my guests, but again, Liz is a bit different. And so I think it's interesting to hear how varied her professional accomplishments are. So I'm just going to give you a few. She has also written a memoir, In the Wide Country of Love, and has created Haven magazine, distributed through Anthropologie. She's got an MFA from the very prestigious School of the Art Institute of Chicago and the University of Cincinnati. She writes for Joanna Gaines magazine, Magnolia Journal, among others, and her client list includes Procter and Gamble and Stan Smith events, among others. So she's really got her hands in a lot of pots, and like I said, very creative thinker. Let's get to it. Liz Bell Young, welcome to the Slow Style Home podcast.
Thank you. Will you come everywhere with me and help? That is so. Thank you for that introduction. And it's good to be with you and your people. Your
Oh,
people.
good.
Who I feel like will be my people.
Yes,
So
I think so too. I
yeah.
think so too. You know, this is not a design book per se, but there's so many connections. And because I think at the core of it, it's about home or really havens, which, there are all kinds of different havens that you mentioned. In fact, before we even jump into my questions, really quickly, just tell us what you mean by havens, because sometimes they aren't physical buildings.
That's right. Yep. And it was good to write this book to figure this out because when I started, I was pretty focused on the physical experience. We were building a house ourselves, and I was a little bit more design focused in the direction that I thought the book would go. As I got into it and really even dug into my own heart behind this, what I realized is that havens, places, I call them places that hold us, people who lift us up, shelter us, give us a moment before we go back out into the wild world. They can be temporary, just interactions on a street. And I think that exploring all of that for me was really helpful because one of the things that I care so much about is it being very accessible to create havens, no matter your resource, no matter where you live right now. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I really appreciate that part of the book. It was there so often you talked about you give what you have, and that's enough. And I think it's more important that you are giving of yourself and being, authentic. I know that's an overused word, but authentically who you are with another human being is more important really than the hostess gift you bring or whatever.
Oh, absolutely. I
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of pressure. I mean, even in the world that I work in, I have to really even watch myself and
Okay.
how I tell stories and invite people into taking care of other people and not putting, you don't have to go out and get this stuff to be able to take care of people. It is hospitality with what you have, which
Right.
is why I try to present it, with sort of gentle attached to that
Yeah.
so
Yes.
that it's a little bit more understandable and it's not so polished and pressured and refined.
Exactly. Exactly. So I love the opening. You tell a great story. I related to this so much in that the situation you're in. So you're in this writing class. It was full of people who want to become serious professional writers, right?
Yeah,
Everybody's there. And, so
that's
there's
right.
some competition or whatever.
Yeah.
And the teacher, the professor said, what do you want to be or who do you want to be? tell us your answer and then kind of what happened after that.
Well, it's like, it's one of those moments where you feel like I knew I had to tell the truth. And I
Mm,
felt the truth as soon as she asked the question
mm,
of how I would answer. And I was very afraid. And I think I was afraid because I do have an ambitious side that like really wants to do things well and be responsible with what I've been given and all of that. And so this was at the Art Institute in Chicago. So this was grad school. I'd already had a few years. We had lived overseas. I'd had some time to like search a little bit. and so I think that's why I was like, oh my word, I'm just gonna have to tell you what I really want to be. And I just said, I want to be a mother. And the room went silent.
yeah.
And I don't know, I think that, it's like when your heart races, when you get to finally, like, that was the authentic thing for me. That was just
Yeah.
core transparency.
Yeah.
And when I said mother, I think I also understood that it meant mother in a broad sense.
Mm,
I definitely
mhm.
wanted to have the experience of having children. We did not have children at the time, but also I realized, I think this is where I end that piece, is like I wanted to help mother others,
Yeah.
and take care of people. And I didn't know exactly how that would look, but I thought, well, maybe it's even as an artist, maybe it's even in the way that I get to write books and
Yes.
all of that. So that's where it landed. And
And
then
that is such
yeah.
a great way to start this book because it just kind of sets the stage for the voice we're about to hear throughout the book. And
Mm.
I want you to tell us, how do you see the book? Why did you write it? Who is it for?
Yeah, I wrote it after a few years of trying to understand what it was I was trying to do.
Mm,
I had a lot of I'd had a lot of experiences in the world of creating experiences, designing experiences, specifically a lot around women.
mhm.
And in
So
doing that,
we're talking about conferences, we're talking about retreats, that kind of thing, right?
thanks for clarifying. This is, yes, rustic retreats. And we were creating this thing called Women Camp. And so for, hundreds, and then it kind of turned into like a few thousand at a time, like bringing all of these women outside of their comfort zones because we wanted it to be an affordable experience for women. So camping is
Yep.
cheaper than hotels. And trying to create sort of this transformative environment as best we could in rural Ohio.
Uh,
So that was happening. I had already been writing for over a decade professionally and working on stories and trying to figure out like, what is it that like, if I really feel like what is my purpose, what do I want to give to others? It was really like to invite them into a place that felt like a haven
mm,
and a place that felt safe, that felt like they could just sort of be immersed by something and feel comfortable there. And because I had worked sort of in this world where it's like designers and set builders and writers and photographers, I wanted to try to like make the book feel that way,
okay.
which was a little bit of a hard sell because
Yeah.
it didn't really fit a category. I just knew
Yeah.
that like if I was trying to help people create havens and experience them for themselves, I thought that the book ought to feel the same
Mm,
way.
right.
So
And it
that's,
does. And it does because this book is the kind that, I mean, I've written all in it and
oh,
you
that
have
makes me so
parts.
happy.
Yeah, you have parts where you want us to write, but I've written on
Yeah.
all other kinds of pages too.
Oh,
And it's the kind of book that I want to have out all the time because I want to be able to dip in and out of it. I was trying to describe this to someone the other day, and it was like, well, I would say it's sort of like essays and almost like poems, although it's written in prose. And it's also
mm,
ideas that you can try out. Like it was a lot of different things. So I really think
mm,
you've nailed it. I really do.
thank you. That means a lot to me. And I love that you have like scrawled and interacted with the pages because
Yeah.
man, I wanted that so bad.
Oh, good, good. I'm so glad. So getting a little bit into the design side of things, as you said, you weren't sure what category this book would fit into, or more importantly, the publishing industry probably was like, I don't know what category this fits
Yeah.
into, because that's categories are very important to the publishing
Yeah.
industry.
I had no idea.
And there's design stuff in there, there's home stuff in there, but it's just not limited to that. So throughout the book, I can tell you've always had this desire, this need, I guess, to create a home wherever you are, in whatever living situation you're in. And I'd love to hear about the home you eventually built. And you were afraid at points, like you were getting it almost done. You'd invested a lot in it. And then you still were saying to your husband, you still had moments of, should we bail? So I'd like to hear about that.
The fears. I know there were a lot of fears. I think it came from, we have lived in a lot of different environments, as everybody probably who's listening, depending on how old you are, right? Like,
Yeah.
And I have always really cared about environments, even though sometimes I would try not to care,
I
because I'm like, well,
know.
that's superficial, or like, does it really matter? But I do remember one time when I didn't care at all. Like, I just thought, like, there's no way. We were in military housing overseas.
Mhm.
This is before we rented a house out in the country with Italians, but we were just in sort of straight military housing. It's in Italy. It was all vinyl, linoleum, hard metal railings, polyester curtains,
Yeah.
and just empty and so cold and echoey.
Yeah.
And I remember walking in and thinking, like, there's no way. Like, I don't even, and so I'm just not even going to care.
Oh,
And
you mean there's no way you can do anything with this? It's so soulless that there's no hope.
yes, yes. And I knew it was temporary. We were going to try hard to find something, but still, I just think, like, I can remember, like, laying in bed at night, because, there's no carpets or rugs. So, like, everything except for a blanket, everything's hard. And just, like, thinking, like, this is sad. And I actually really do want to do something, but I felt stuck.
Okay.
Now, what I would say, what I could have done just to make us more comfortable, to feel more like grounded to a place, is I could have just gone out to the Italian farm thrift stores and just started pulling things in, just pull plants inside, sticks, it doesn't matter, anything, to start to, like, create something that actually feels like comfortable to you.
Yeah.
What makes you comfortable?
Yeah.
And what works for your family? And I happen to like things that are a little chipped, a little weathered, because I like, I'll break things, and I
Yeah.
like to feel permission to just live as we live. I want my kids to feel that. And so, anyway, finding your comfort zone. And so, like I was saying, it's like I have kind of grown into that. But then when we decided to build the house that we're in now, which is by far, like, the best house experience we've ever had. I mean, to get to design something from the ground up is, I know it's a wild gift.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was scary, because then now you're at the opportunity, So it's like you've decided to pull the trigger on, like, say it's remodeling your kitchen, and you're like, oh, and now we're here. Now we actually have to make choices.
Yeah.
It was also scary because I was like, do we deserve it? Do I deserve it?
Wow.
Like, we would waffle between, like, well, that's just a self-worth thing, which is part of this book too, kind of having to go through, like, do you value your life and the lives of others? And so I think that was another part of why it felt so hard.
And you were moving from being like next door to your sisters to being, in my opinion, not that far away. But it sounded like you felt like you were moving, across the country, that you were worried that your daily interactions with them would change, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's hard to let go of family sometimes when you feel like, gosh, we've got it so good here. Why are we changing it? But there was something pulling you. There was something that you knew, I need to create this home. Do you know what that is? What it was?
I think part of it is just, when and my husband also sort of has this artistic desire to create. And I think that is a huge part of it. And we did move away from two of my sisters. And I know they're only 5 minutes away, which I know sounds ridiculous because it's so close. And now we live next to another sister and behind my parents' house. Yeah, I think that the desire to create from scratch, which I always love, even though it can be intimidating, especially when it's something large.
Yes. I want to ask you, what have you learned about yourself that you want out of a home through this experience of living in these different situations? And I'm asking because the slow style approach that I teach, I really believe it's connected to personal development or self, self development. That when
Yeah,
you create a home, that there's that inner work that's happening as well. And I'm wondering if I assume you relate to that and kind of
I
what
do.
you want to get out of your home.
I do. And I love that is your approach. And this is why I was also excited to talk to you about it, because I think that when you can kind of get past, I mean, when you can get past all of the influences that are trying to inform your decisions
Yep.
about what a home is supposed to be and look like and all of that kind of stuff, I think that the slowness in approaching it is really important because it allows you to really infuse what you care about. And so I know we talked a little bit on email, but like how that idea of putting things on the table.
Yeah.
So as we started to design the house, and before we had really made any kind of selections, we just had drawings and sketches and all that kind of stuff. Of course, I mean, I think probably every listener who's hearing this right now, like you've seen the mood boards and all of
Yeah.
this, and a lot of times it's on a screen. uh, I really think that the whole physical mood board is really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
At first, I started with just the tile samples that we had been looking at,
The
you
typical
know,
stuff on a
the
mood
very
board,
typical, that's
the
right.
fabric swatches. So tell people what, before you
Yes.
continue, just in case people
Okay.
don't know what you're referring to when you say a physical mood board.
Okay, so I really mean like on a table. Unfortunately, I chose the table that we ate on, which made it hard to eat for like months. But really like taking all of the materials that you think are going to be a part of the room or already are a part of it and putting items on the table. So if it's, fresh new stuff, you're putting on like tile samples or carpet swatches and all that kind of stuff. So I started with that and I was like, well, this is kind of lackluster. Like it was
Mhm.
pretty and it was fun to figure out like, oh, colorways and that kind of stuff. But like it didn't feel, it wasn't us yet.
Not yet.
And that's a scary thing about going into design. You're like, is it going to feel like us? And so I just started bringing in the reality of us. And that looked like, my favorite wooden bowl. I had some pottery from my kids, stacks of paper, because sadly to my husband, I just leave paper everywhere. The pens I use, the things my kids like interact with, because that is our life. And all of that stuff is going to be really the beautiful part of the design, but like those are the layers. And so to strip those away when you're trying to imagine what you want to create is actually not helpful because it's not the full picture. So
Oh,
I have a horseshoe. I don't know why I've hung on to it forever, but like that needed to be on my table because it
yeah.
matters to me. I mean, I know this part sounds funny, but like my kids keep the teeth that they lose, and I had a little dish that had their teeth, and I was like, that's
Love
part
it.
of our life. We will be losing teeth in this new house. Hopefully not mine. So yeah, that was the whole like putting it on the table exercise. And I think like sort of beyond where that takes the design of what you're doing, it's like really good, like
Mhm.
heart work too.
Heart work. Yeah. I call it soul work, but same thing.
Yes.
Yeah, I love this so much because when I talk about doing a 3D mood board, that's what I call it.
Yeah.
I talk about bringing in objects that are meaningful to you and then seeing what kinds of inspiration you get from the feel of it, the material, the story behind it, the color, whatever. I hadn't really thought about there's another layer that you just mentioned, which is the reality layer of just daily life, a stack of paper or missing teeth. I think that's yet a third element. So you've got the pretty stuff, the
Yeah.
tiles and the carpets and the carpet samples, and then you've got the meaningful stuff, but then you've got the reality stuff too. And I just think that that is so helpful to, especially to non-designers,
Mm,
because I think we need to see it
mm,
in order to really imagine it. I think if you're not born with that, kind of automatic sensitivity to design, and you're not going to school for it, you need
yeah.
other ways to get there, to get that intuition going.
Yes. Yes. I love that.
I want to circle back to the comfort thing too, because I sort of harp on this a little bit. when I ask people, what do you want to feel in this room? And the knee-jerk response is comfortable. I want to feel comfortable. And then I say, okay, that's not deep enough.
Mhm.
Everybody wants to feel comfortable. Of course, that's a given. So let's go deeper. And then I, talk them through how to go deeper. But what you're saying is comfort is enough. That's enough. But the way you said it made me think, oh, you mean something deeper than what we normally think of when you hear the word comfort.
Yeah.
So what do you mean by comfort?
Our comforts are very different. I have a friend who's very into sort of data and finances, loves spreadsheets. She doesn't like the rounded corners in her house because she is comfortable in 90-degree angles. And so that is different than my level of comfort. I actually, I like a curved angle. I have a friend whose comfort is more nostalgic. And so comfort for her looks like a lot of like old letters just taped up or pinned to the wall, so many photographs. And so we do have different ways of feeling comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just about a soft blanket, but
Mm-hmm.
it's where do I really feel at home? And I went into this a little bit in the book, but I think getting to try out a lot of different places or be in a lot of different people's homes, our grandmothers, a cabin in a different part of the world, that helped us understand, okay, this is what makes us comfortable.
Yeah.
Like my husband really loves pocket doors because
Yeah.
that for him is comfort. There's not interference.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
you can just pass.
Love it.
Yeah, I loved that too. I was so glad he made that choice. So we have a lot of pocket doors. And yeah, for me, I think that if a place has a lot of continuity between rooms, that makes me feel very comfortable. I feel very peaceful that way. So, again, it's some people feel comfortable in red. I don't feel comfortable in red.
Yeah.
I really do feel comfortable in earth tones. And so I didn't fight that with this house. I just said, okay, well then let's do that.
Right. Right.
Whether
Yeah.
or not it's popular, whatever.
Right. It makes a lot of sense. One of the most designy parts of your book I loved, and I want you to describe them for us. These are your maps, your mapping exercise.
Yeah.
And I loved how you talk in poetry, but then you also have these actionable steps to take, and you're trying to get your feelings onto paper about what you want to experience in life, if you're creating an event, or just in your home, room by room. So tell us a little bit about these maps.
The maps. I sort of stumbled into this. I did love to draw things and plan things as a child. And when I say plan and maps, I don't mean I'm actually horrible with real maps. I get lost in my space a lot. And maybe that's why I'm drawn to creating my own sort of maps.
Right.
But when I was working as a professional writer, I was, of course, doing a lot on a screen.
Yeah.
And I remember like getting into a creative project that was going to be a small photo essay magazine. And someone had left out a stack of 11 by 17 paper. And I was just like, oh, I like that size. And so because I was stuck in that other area, on my screen, I just thought, well, what if I try to feel the flow of what this is just with and I'm not a fine artist. I just like to sketch. And so I started to plan the flow of how that magazine would feel. And so immediately it showed me that doesn't feel right. That's way too abrupt. This needs space for the reader to breathe. I have to connect the dots, so it showed me by putting it visual what I was missing.
Yeah.
And
Taking it off the
so,
screen and making it like something your hands could hold and you could write on. And yeah.
yes, exactly. It's just, thick Sharpie and ultra fine point Sharpie. I just organize it that way, one sheet of paper, and then throw it away when I don't like it anymore. Restart.
And so you do this for you might be mapping out your year, you might be mapping out a 5-year vision, events that you run,
Mhm.
and designs, right? Room by room designs as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Because I think, if you talk about events or even room by room design, how do people get from one spot to the next, and what kind of transition or guidance do we need as a family? What feels right to walk into? What feels right to walk out of?
Mm.
What do you want to take with you when you leave? So there's a lot of things like that if you put it down into a visual display, maybe this is a helpful tool. It teaches you how to get that flow.
It's interesting that you're talking about transitions. What I focus on a lot is getting people to just think one room at a time and not trying to do the whole house at once. But eventually, when you get to all the rooms, you also have to think about what happens between rooms and how you get from one room to another. And I think that's where that cohesion that comes in, that feeling of cohesion between room to room. How do you want to flow? Different rooms have different energies because they have different purposes.
Yeah.
And I think that you seem to have really learned about that through your experience creating experiential events. There were two that really resonated with me, and I'm wondering if you could just very quickly describe what they are. One was uh, a dinner for 500 women,
Mm-hmm.
where you invited 20 women and then they invite 20 women, or I don't know, something. It was really cool.
Yeah.
And the other one was, it was kind of almost like I don't know, an art installation. I'm not sure. It was inside, but you had tents set up and
Yeah.
grass, and that was an experience for people. So just really quickly, tell us what those two things were.
Sure. I'll start with the feeding 500 people outside. It was limited resources. We wanted it to feel very approachable. And there were some artists in our group and people who aren't afraid of ladders and, you know, drills and all that kind of stuff. We wanted it to be beautiful, but also home-like. And so we ripped up fabric. We used sheets for tablecloths. We pulled together wooden candle holders, but they were from different places. So we sprayed them all gold. We tried to make do with what we had,
It sounded magical. And when you say ripped up fabric, I think you were specifically tearing them into little pieces to tie ribbons around string, right? Which is very, if you think about, hundreds of ribbons on string, it's quite festive.
It
And all
is.
different colors,
Yeah,
right?
that's right. And we just, yeah, and just hung them above us. And yeah, I
And you got
mean,
the food in ways that was affordable, but it
mhm.
also sounded like so so many people, maybe everyone, I'm not sure, were really pitching in, and so there was sort of this
Yes.
feeling of ownership, and we did this together. This community came together and did this amazing thing.
Yes. And that's so important because that was a huge learning. Because at first we thought, like, it'll just be this group of 20. Well, what we realized is how much people actually wanted to be part of making it. And
Mm.
so all of the women who came to the dinner actually had a role in helping make the dinner. So whether
Amazing.
you were doing the cast iron pot dessert over the campfire, or
Yep.
if your team was ripping up the fabric, or if your
Right.
team was setting the candles, so everybody really did have a role. So if you don't know anybody, you've just maybe bonded over like how hard it was to bake a
Right.
cobbler in a cast iron pot, not easy.
Right.
And then you get to feast on that, and it's really sweet. So I think like the whole idea of collaboration and bringing people into the process with you is really rewarding and
And I think you,
necessary.
and what I took away from it too was that, because I talk a lot about experimentation, playing around with things in order to figure out what you like. And this to me was that on this grand scale. These people were all having the experience of creating a haven for the night.
Yeah.
And that hands-on experience, I'm imagining, was very rewarding. And what a gift. The story about where you had a bunch of tents set up indoors, that really, really, really moved me. Tell us about that
Mm.
one.
So I was working for a church, a very artistic church, which was an incredible experience coming out of art school because it's this sort of like mixed genres, I guess. I don't know
Yeah.
how else to say it. It's multidisciplinary, and so it was a multi-room installation. And this is in an old warehouse with concrete floors, and it was like, how do we transform this place into something where people can find respite, because the goal was kind of like a mini journey really to walk through. And so we ended up getting some old sale fabric canvas and made tents out of that. We brought in grass. We actually brought in real grass. It was tempting to go to fake grass because real grass is hard inside when you run this for
Right.
a bit of time. We had to water it. But I think what it gave to people, all it was, a canvas tent on a bed of grass. I just remember a man in a business suit falling asleep in one of them. And
Yes, you did
his
write about
legs were
that.
sticking out. It was like Wizard of Oz. And I think people are surprised sometimes when they're taken care of and when they're led into something that does feel safe and intimate and okay to let down your guard. Sometimes you just fall asleep.
You needed rest. You needed
Yeah.
respite, rest. Yeah, I just, that was really incredible how people would walk through and some people would go into the tents and some people wouldn't, or some people would go with another person into a tent
Yeah.
and just allow themselves to take a little time and just be there. And I'm so glad you did real grass because I mean, it feels very different than the fake stuff. So yeah, under your feet. Well, I could keep talking to you for a long time.
Oh, thank
I
you.
really do love this book. Like I said, it's different than so many other books, and it's a real it's a haven because when you can dip in and out of it and just take a few minutes to sit with your tea or your coffee or glass of wine and just read one or two of your essays, it's very uplifting and it kind of fills your cup, so to speak.
Love
What is
that.
your biggest hope for this book? What ripple effect do you hope that it has?
Well, when I started, actually, it was just going to be called Haven. And I just kind of woke up with like, it needs an S on the end
Okay.
because my hope is that anybody who picks it up wants to create their own. I really hope that it's an invitation for everybody to do whatever they will do with it, which will be different than the way I've done with it.
Right.
And so that's my hope. I don't have, well, I mean, I know I have a publisher with a marketing plan. I just, my hope is just that it does feel like a gift. If at the end of the day, that's what it is, like an offering to someone that you can dip in and out of, that will make me very, very thankful that I got to do it. I am thankful I got to do it.
Yeah. Wonderful to talk to you.
You
Such a
too.
pleasure.
You
And
too.
yeah, I'm really, really thrilled that you spent some time with us today. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.